In this video, we'll be going over demystifying and understanding a little better the bottom action bar that the Common UI provides out of the box. We'll be using Lyra as an example, but everything covered here should also work on a project that uses Common UI. We'll also go over using the hold button functionality, and we'll be using our new knowledge to create a credits bottom action bar action buttons to slow down the text and to speed it up. And then you can hold for 1 second to skip the credits. This tutorial should help you add any type of action and bindings that you want in your action bar. That also supports mouse and keyboard and gamepad. Also, I'll be going through how a basic Common UI adds the back handler button, so the back button, and also how to bind actions in code that you can define in Blueprint so that you can make it do anything you want. I've started a fresh Lyra project and just called it Credit Skip. I'm using Lyra 5.3. I'm using Lyra because it already has all of these action bar bindings. It's overall a great example of all of this Common UI. So in my case, I was mostly curious about essentially how these buttons are bound and if there's a possibility of having one that has a activation of a long hold. So long pressing the X button would cancel the changes. So it could be useful for if you make the mistake of pressing the button and you didn't actually want to cancel your changes. I was mostly curious about these ones and how they're bound and how the back button is bound as well. So to check that out, all I did was go to Tools and then Debug Widget Reflector, and then pick Hit Testable Widget, and then hover over it, and then pressing the Escape button. So here I can see that this is a bound action button, which is a child of a class called Lyra Bound Action Button. And if I click on this, you'll notice that it is a child of a common bound action button. So you don't necessarily need to use the Lyra version. All it seems to do is support common button styles between the keyboard, gamepad, and touch style, which is also really useful, but there's a lot of functionality already coming as part of the Common UI plugin. So if I navigate to that, it handles a lot of things like the text action name, the input action widget itself, which is the key that's bound to the action. And whenever the input has changed is already handled by the common button base. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the project. So here we see the bound action button. This is where the image will be. It's the input action widget, and this is where the input that your gamepad has will show up. And in the details panel, I noticed that there's a progress material parameter, and it just details the material parameter on progress material brush to update the held percentage. This value would be between 0 and 1. So that already indicated that this is already set up, but it said none. So let's go ahead and open the material. And in the parameter, you'll notice that there is a percentage parameter. And when you update it, here you go. So there's a progress bar. And there's also a color. Okay, so in my case, I actually want the progress to be, let's say yellow. Yellow should contrast well with all the blue that Lyra has. And so the name is percentage. So I'll just put that back to 0. But now that we know the name of a parameter that controls the progress, I will just write it down. So percentage is the name of my material param. If you want to call it anything else, you could always change that. And if you have your own material to show progress in a different, more fancy way, you can use the same functionality. That's right, I was still playing. So I'm just gonna stop that, compile and save. And this won't do anything yet. The next thing I want to do is I want to find where the settings inputs are. Okay, so I'm just gonna go to the content, and then I think it's UI. And you'll notice these common input action database. So this one is for the universal actions. It has a bunch of different actions. And these are mostly the ones showing on your HUD whenever you have a grenade to throw. It shows what the action button is. I actually care about the ones for the settings screen. So let's navigate to that. And I'll close down the widget reflector. So settings, and then we have our save actions. So we have our cancel changes and our apply. You'll notice that there's no back action. That's because it's already handled with the back handler, and we'll go through that soon. What I want to do is I just want to add a hold duration. So in your DT save actions, in the cancel changes, there is an option that action requires hold. So let's turn that on, and the hold time, half a second should do. And then the hold rollback time is essentially it'll slowly regress if you let go of the button instead of completely restarting. So I'm just going to do the same thing just to see it slowly go down. And then there's your gamepad input override. So if you're supporting the Switch platform, you would probably have your whatever swap for the back and confirm over here if it's applicable. Okay, so I'll save that. And let's see what that did. Okay, so when I play, escape, options, and then the mouse and keyboard, you'll see it doesn't change anything for the keyboard and mouse because we didn't change that. But as soon as I press anything on my gamepad, you'll notice that it shows cancel changes, hold, and it even has this nice animation. So that's nice that it supports that out of the box. So that's probably because the string is really long. So you could always change that with cancel. You could put any text you want here. Okay, so, and then, oh, it's so fast. And then if I go to options, if I hold a little bit, you'll see how it fills up and it slowly, or in this case, it regresses really fast. So it will wait until I hold half a second and then it will apply whatever action it was bound to. And you'll notice that the Lyra settings screen, which is essentially an activatable widget if you compare to a non-Lyra project, it has a bottom action bar. Okay, and the bottom action bar is just a common user widget, and it uses this common bound action bar. And the way to automatically add the back action to it is essentially to make sure that your widget itself has the display widgets action in the action bar, assuming it has action. And then it handles the back input. It has the back input data, which is from the universal actions, and you get your default back, which is the back key or the escape key on the keyboard. If you have any kind of widget that doesn't need any special attention or anything, you can just enable isBack handler and isBack action displayed in action bar. So this will make sure that the back key you have will go back, or it'll essentially deactivate the widget. So these all come with the common activatable widget, and it's out of the box with the common UI, which is really nice. The next part of this video, we're going to be very inspired by the Lyra settings screen, and we're going to create our own action bindings so that our credit screen, you can speed up, you can slow down, and you can skip the credits if you wish to. So if I'll just stop that. I'll navigate to the Lyra front end. So this is our main menu. And if we go to the credit screen, you'll notice that you can't see the action bar yet, but if you click, it will show up, and it will also show up on the controller. If you press, I think it's A. There's no other actions. Okay, so I'm gonna stop that. And let's see what the game setting panel is. So the game setting panel is just a common user widget. And then let's see what the credit widget is. So I'll just play credits and I'll just pick the widget. Okay, so the credits is a Lyra activatable widget, which is a child of the common activatable widget. If your code isn't showing up, it might just be that you just need to, you'll have those options to generate your Visual Studio project or generate your Writer project, and then it should just work. But yeah, in our case, since the settings panel is just a user widget and the other one was just a Lyra activatable widget, I'm going to choose to have our credits widget be a child of Lyra activatable widget, just to get the extra perks that Lyra has concerning mouse capture mode and the widget input mode. I feel like it has a more robust input handling of widgets. But in your own project, you could always just use the common activatable widget. So yeah, we're going to go ahead and add our classes. Okay, so in your project, under Lyra game, UI, and then you can see the setting screens over here. So this is a good spot for it. I'm going to create a new class. So you could essentially take the files from the GitHub and just drag them inside of this folder. But I'm just going to create them just to show how nice it is. I think Visual Studio has pretty much the same level of awesomeness. So I'm going to create in the Unreal class. And all classes, I'm going to choose the Lyra activatable widget. This is a good spot. I'm going to call this one credits or credit screen. Okay, so a new class, Lyra activatable widget, and that all looks good. So okay. All right, and then now I can go ahead and close the Unreal instance. Okay, and then I'm gonna copy over the code, which is very similar to the game settings. So essentially what this code does is it sets up these 3 actions and a way to have a Blueprint implementable event bound to these actions. So I'm just going to navigate to my credit screen C++ and paste the rest of the code. Okay, so pretty simple. We have our back handle. We register these 3 action bindings and we register them to the functions. So handle slowdown action and handle speed up action, all they are Blueprint implementable events. So I could put any sort of logic I want on these action. This just shows how powerful it is with the bottom action bar. Essentially, if I didn't implement any of these, I could still use the backhandler functionality. And unfortunately, as far as I know, I haven't found a way to add actions to the action bar through Blueprint only. So it seems like it's mostly a C++ feature so far. Okay, and that is all the code that we need. Handling the back action, we just call to deactivate the widget. It will throw a warning here because we're using a function that's named the same way as handling back action in the, I think it's in the Lyra activatable widget, or no, actually in the common activatable widget. So it might be best to name it something else. Let's go ahead and run it. Just make sure you close your Unreal Engine. Yeah, and I have development. Let's see what that does. Okay, that has done compiling. So I'm going to go ahead and navigate to the Lyra front end again. I'm going to go ahead and open the credits. The credit screen, or the widget underscore credits, is a good example of a activatable widget that does not use any bound actions, but it does use the back handler. So that's how the back button shows up at the bottom action bar. It essentially just sees if there's an action bar somewhere in this hierarchy, and it will add that back handler button. And the back button is actually defined in the project settings. The back handle button is set up in your project settings under game common input settings, and then it's in your common input data. So if we open that up, you'll notice that the default click action is just default forward, and then the default back action is the one that is being populated whenever you use a back handler. So in our case, we're choosing the universal actions, and then the default back is the gamepad face button right. It even has some gamepad input overrides for Switch. I don't have the Switch SDK, but this is what comes with the Lara project. So it only shows up here, but you unfortunately cannot add it again to your own common input action database unless you have the Switch SDK. And then the keyboard input type, you have the escape key, but it also just has the button that says just back. This is where the text is for the back button. And in our case, we don't have a hold display name. If we don't, it'll just add hold. All right, so that is how the magical back button is set up. But in our case, we want to have 3 different action buttons. So we're going to use the new class that we just created. So let's go to the graph and then the class settings, and we'll change the parent class to our credit screen, and then compile and save. And since they're so similar, we don't even get any warnings, anything. And little tidbit, this is where the list of people is generated. So if you ever want to read from a file or a data table of all the wonderful people that worked on your game, this would be where you populate it. In this case, it's just studio people 1, 2, 3, and then all the way to 100. Now we have our credits. We want to turn off the is back handler functionality. I haven't figured out exactly why the settings didn't just use this here. It probably helps to bind all the actions together. We're going to do the same. And then at least our back input action, we can definitely just use the same. So I think it's just universal actions, default back. Okay, and then the slow down and speed up. We're going to create our own input actions data table just for that one. Okay, so what I like to do is I like to copy paste some things. So we're going to use the settings data table. So I'm just going to copy paste or control C, and then I'm going to paste it inside our credits folder. And I'll call this one credit actions. Okay, and in this case, I'll just call this one slow. Okay, and then display name. Oh, that is the display name, that's right. I'll rename this row. So rename slow. I'll rename this one to speed. So rename speed. And then speed, so that it all fits nicely. Okay. And our slowdown, I think I like the key X. Yeah, I'm just gonna click the X button on my gamepad, and that looks good. The keyboard doesn't need any key. You could technically put a key if you want, but it won't even show the key brush because that's not set up. And also you can just click on the button. Okay, and then the speed, I'm gonna use the gamepad face button top. Okay, so, oh, and actually, I don't really want the back button, so I'm going to call that one skip. It essentially acts like a back button, but it'll allow the player to hold it down as they see all the names of the wonderful people that worked on the game and to feel some sort of regret for skipping it. Okay, so skip. I personally like it when there's the option to just go forward or backward, especially if you're funded by Kickstarter and the person wants to find their name and they might have just missed it and you have to play the whole thing again. Okay, so the skip button, I'm gonna choose the B button, and this one will be a hold input. So the key is the B button, and this one will require a hold. I'll say 1 second. And I guess a slower rollback time. Okay, that looks good. Okay, so skip, slow, speed. And I'm gonna go back to my credits. And now we can actually use these actions we just defined. So common input action. It's interesting because these are separate from enhance input. And I have yet to really dig in to see how exactly this magic is working. But this is mostly just a tutorial of how do you use it. So our back input action data, which I should probably rename to skip, I'm going to use the credit actions and then skip. And then the same for the other three. I still am unclear of the ordering of them. I think it's the order that you bind them. Okay, so credits, actions, and then this one will be just slow, and then credit, actions. This one will be speed. So I'm going to go to my graph and we're going to go ahead and override or implement these functions that we have. So we created, what did we create? So we created handle slowdown action and handle speed up action. The one for the back handler, we don't need to override because we're already taking care of that in code where we're just deactivating the widget. So handle speed up action. So for now, since we haven't seen the game for a little bit, we're just going to print a text. So slowing down, and then speed up, speeding up. Okay, and let's see if our actions even work. Okay, so when we press play, credits, it doesn't show yet. If I click, aha, it shows. Huh. Oh, that's right, because the skip button is the first one. Okay, so slowing down, speeding up. So we could put any sorts of logic in our action button. And if I use my controller, it will show skip as a hold. And that's right, because we copied off the other one. We also had a hold on our speed. Okay, so I'm just gonna cancel that. So don't need a hold action. And another thing I just noticed is that you have your navbar priority. So what if I change that to 1, this one to 2? Unless the higher number is lower. Let's see. Oh, sweet. Okay, so the navbar priority matches the position of the button. Okay, so now you have slow, speed, and then skip. Okay, so we're gonna add the functionality of slowing down or speeding up the credits. Okay, so you'll notice in the credits, there's already a variable for the scroll speed. So this is what we're going to finagle with or add or remove to slow down or speed up our credits. Okay, so whenever you slow it down, I'm going to drag this off, press Alt, let go. It skips a nice step. Okay. I'm going to set the speed to the scroll speed +1. And then let's just make sure that we don't go past a certain speed, which you can define. Let's promote this to a variable, and let's call this the max speed. Okay, so our max speed, let's say it's a max speed of 10. Okay. And then scroll speed. Let's do something similar for the speed up. Oh, actually, I've messed these up. Okay, so speed up adds to it, slow down slows it down. Okay, so your scroll speed -1. And this one will be a max of the minimum speed you want. So I'll put 0.5. Or I'll put 1 because we'll never reach 0.5. Okay, and sweet, that should be all we need. Okay, so let's see. So credits. I can speed up. And I can slow it down. So it's not the most intuitive as a player. Oh, that was fast. Oh, and another thing we want to do is we want to reset the speed whenever you reopen it. So I'm just going to stop this. And then whenever it's activated, it calls this reset function. So I'm just going to add the scroll speed here. The scroll speed defaults to 1. So I'm just going to default it back to 1. Okay, so now I'm just going to speed this up. And then when I quit, I can go back to it and it's back to the speed of 1. So now you're empowered with essentially, you could bind any sort of action to your action bar, and Common UI just makes it easy for you. And it doesn't specifically have to be in Lyra, but Lyra is a great example of setting it up and seeing it work in action. So I might try to add this to my basic Common UI project that I use in 2 other videos, but I'm trying to keep that one blueprint only. So all I've used so far is just the default back handler. So as always, thank you for watching and see you in the next one.